Well, most of you probably remember the morning of June 2nd, 2008, as this was an extremely high-impact event for a large portion of our CWA, highlighted by softball-sized hail produced by several storms. As many recall, the most significant damage occurred in and around Manhattan, where numerous vehicles and buildings suffered extreme damage. South of the interstate within the sector for this exercise, one of the storms demonstrated similar characteristics to the storms north of the interstate and likely produced baseball to softball-sized hail from Morris County all the way through Anderson County into Pleasant Hills area. This radar loop shows the event play out with the actual polygons from the office that morning. For the most part, the strongest storms moved close to the bunker's right-moving supercell motion, with perhaps a slightly more right motion as the storms hugged the better low and mid-level moisture. The strongest storm within the sector was definitely the trailing supercell. However, the Manhattan cell did cross the interstate into our sector late in the event, producing softball-sized hail near the radar site. One of the challenges that confronted the warning forecasters on the morning of the event was the decision to warn for tornado or not, especially with the stronger rotating storms. After some quick mesoanalysis, the forecasters deemed the tornado threat minimal, almost non-existent, as you can see a fairly strong inversion above the surface in the 12Z Topeka observed sounding with an elevated mix layer above the 750 millibar level. There is plenty of elevated CAPE through the minus 10 degrees Celsius and minus 30 degrees Celsius layers, which is the preferred hail growth zone. We can then fill out our cheat sheet with the observed temperature levels from our sounding to get our proxy for the potential for large hail. In this instance, we'll leave the Donovan blank alone since these storms were very organized. It would make these values less than useful in this case. For the main storm in our sector, we can pretty easily identify the B-word that went all the way up to 21,000 feet. Since our storm is demonstrating supercell characteristics with a very pronounced B-word, we can implement the reasoning for hail larger than baseball size. Mind you, all the radar signatures investigated in this storm took place before the first and only report of greater than 4-inch hail down in Coffee County. Since our minus 30 sea level is around 28,000 feet, we should expect to find 60 to 65 dBz above that minus 30 degrees Celsius level. At 1459 UTC, the pronounced B word is still present at nearly 30,000 feet, with 65 to 70 dBz present as well above our baseline height of 28,000 feet. For softballs to be present in a storm, the 60 dBz height should reach around 35,000 feet, which can be seasonally variable. At 1459, we see that the 60 dBz height reaches the 35,000 foot level pretty easily, with the reflectivity signature suggesting the potential for hail approaching softball size. We'll look at the VR signature in the storm, which is the average between the max inbound and max outbound velocities associated with the mid-level mesocyclone. A nice sweet spot for softball-sized hail would be a range between 40 and 60 knots. In this case, the maximum VR at 1459 UTC is located about 27,000 feet off the surface and registers a little over 60 knots. Again, adequate to consider softball-sized hail. Storm top divergence is probably the toughest signature to investigate with the WSR 88D. So this parameter should only be used when proper radar sampling allows. As opposed to the VR signature of the storm top divergence is aggregate instead of averaged. If you can sample the sum of the storm properly, storm top divergence should be in the 120 to 180 knot range. In this case, the only really good look we get at the storm top divergence at the summit came from the Wichita radar just downstream of that range folding area. Here we get upward of 175 knots of storm top divergence at the 45,000 foot summit. Drawn up a few take-home points from this case. The supercells, both north and south of the interstate, demonstrated radar signatures consistent with previous storms that have produced 4+ inch hail. The trailing supercell in the southern sector likely had at least baseball-sized hail through its entire path from eastern Morris County through Anderson County, as this was corroborated through actual reports, but it probably also had softball-sized hail along a majority of its path based on the signatures demonstrated with the radar. And it's probably safe to estimate that a supercell has at the very least baseball-sized hail with it, but probably has softball-sized hail when it demonstrates these following radar signatures concurrently. Those signatures being a strong bounded weak echo region through a very thick layer, at least 60 dBz through the -10 to -30 degrees Celsius hail growth zone, which the actual height of that can be seasonally dependent. The V sub r needs to be above 40 knots, and the storm top divergence should surpass 120 knots. Thank you for doing this case. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to fill out the job sheet and return it to George with appropriate feedback.